Good morning. It's Tricia here with Metamorphosis Moments, the interview series. And today I am talking to Rachna Malkanei. Rachna is a relatively new therapist from Dubai, and she has some very interesting insights, and I'm really excited to talk to her this morning about her new practice and her experiences going through the program. And welcome to my chat this morning, Rachna.
Hi, Tricia. Thank you for having me, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so happy to talk to you and to actually get to meet you face to face today. That's really, really great for me to meet all of these wonderful RTT practitioners, coaches, and the like. And I think you told me that you're also a life coach.
That's right, I am.
And what kinds of clients do you see in Dubai?
I mean, in Dubai, there are few categories that I find a lot of common link in Dubai is when it comes to mental health. I only look at from the perspective of youngsters. I have a daughter who's 25 years old, and she's born and brought up in Dubai. And when I saw her growing up, and she's got a huge group of friends, and when I would see those youngsters growing up, I mean, Dubai is a brilliant place. It's a fantastic, safe, amazing lifestyle. But there's something I would observe that all these children growing up, especially in the world of digital media, develop a lot of anxiety. For some reason, they have it all in the world, and yet they have anxiety. I mean, yes, they would have some family issues or everything that we are going through. As human beings, as human species, whatever complexes we have in our lives. And what really took me by surprise, I saw these children growing, in front of me. They were so young, and I saw them growing through the school years. And then as they grew up towards their teenage, like my daughter would tell me that some of the friends had disorders, and they went to the psychiatrist and they ended up being on medication. And I would like, and my question would always be, was that the only option left?
Right.
I mean, did they have to straight away go on medication? Did they try other things? Because we all know some people might need it, but it cannot be the first option. It cannot be the immediate option. We
Especially with
can look at
kids,
other.
like you just go straight into pharmaceuticals and
Yeah, and it's their formative years. I mean, their bodies are still young, they're teenagers, they're still just developing. Their brain is still developing for that matter. I mean, their prefrontal cortex is still not even fully developed till the age of about 25.
right.
So at that age, imagine when I'm hearing, children going to that place of needing medication, and then I'm also seeing them grow through medication and still having episodes which are quite scary while still being on medication. That got me really thinking that this is a place where I think a lot of youngsters need help.
Mm-hmm.
And I became kind of the go-to person for my daughter's group. Like, everybody would somehow, I'm like the group therapist mom or the group coach that everybody, and I would just, they would just, if anything, I would say, okay, just have conversation with me. They would
Is
just
that
come and have.
how you got into life coaching?
Absolutely. I was in fact told eventually that you already are a coach. You've been a coach. And I
You're
was like,
doing it,
okay.
lady.
I mean, like, I really never know. I was a businesswoman. I mean, I'm a designer by profession. I'm a businesswoman. I've already have two other businesses. I design genuine leather bags and shoes. And we have our own brand in Dubai. So I was busy doing that as well, as a woman. I really didn't see myself stepping into a life coach or eventually a hypnotherapist, an RTT practitioner. I didn't see myself going there. But my life took a course where I saw these youngsters and my heart went out to them. And my house was just open to them anytime they want to come and speak and discuss it with me. And I felt that's an area which we all could contribute a lot to is our future generation, our youngsters, because they really are lost. And social media might feel like, oh, everybody's connected and everybody knows what's happening, but it is making them the most lonely in life. we are watching a generation which seems to be the most connected right now
But it's
through
artificial,
media, but yet the most lonely generation
right?
because there is no personal connect. So
Well,
anybody can
everyone
post
sees
it
the world through
online.
this lens of artificial Instagram perfect life. And then
Yeah,
I think, especially young people, because they don't have that life experience and exposure, they
yeah,
then look at their own sad little existence in their own mind and they
yeah,
compare it to these perfect images of Kim Kardashian and, whatever current influencer. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm old, so I don't know who they watch right now. But like they're comparing their own personal life to these influencers on Instagram and TikTok,
Yeah,
and their life doesn't compare. So of course they begin to judge themselves harshly and feel like they are just not enough. And that's really the
yeah.
crux of a lot of it.
Yeah, and as much as social media could be useful, but it also is very crowded and very noisy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place where there are million advices, and yet there is not a single advice for you, for your individual needs, because we are all individual human beings. So while there could be so much happening out there, but it's yet not happening for you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that illusion that I'm watching this
Yes.
post and I'm listening to some great advice, and okay, you're listening to it, but then what are you doing about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is not unique to you. So generic advice is just generic. Unless, we encourage them and we show them a way that you could just make yourself your best project. You could be your favorite project. And if you could just take that forward, you could turn this life around because this is a beautiful life just waiting to blossom. But in that illusion of thinking that I know because I watched this video, I know because I watched this person saying this, and I understand a concept is not really understanding. You do not truly understand anything unless you experience it.
That's
Experience
100%
is,
true.
where the real knowledge and the real grounding of that knowledge and integration happens for you as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the illusion we as coaches, as therapists can just bring forward awareness to. That just because you know something doesn't necessarily mean that you understand it. Knowing is not
100%.
enough. You just
100%.
need to do a
Yeah.
little better than that.
I mean, I think this is why I notice in my own practice when I will do maybe a long form consult with somebody, a paid consult, and will outline steps to improve their life,
Hmm.
but yet they are not capable of implementing that 9 times out of 10. They think they are, but then maybe they go off and try it, and then they almost always come back and go, yeah, no, I need more.
Hmm.
Um, so it's not enough to even be spoon fed the step by step for a lot of people. They actually need hand holding through it. And
Yeah.
I mean, back to your original concept there with, kids are really hurting and struggling. I find it really interesting that no child is born as an infant with an anxiety problem.
Yeah.
Nobody. So
Yeah.
clearly something has happened, whether it be a trauma
Yeah.
or there's some dynamic within the household. And that gets really sticky when you're dealing with kids and trying to explain, mom, you're too controlling, mom, you're too demanding, or whatever the problem is the household has. That
Hmm.
anxiety is coming either from trauma or from the
Hmm.
parents and their inappropriate expectations
Yeah.
and the pressure that's being placed on the child regarding schoolwork or home performance or future prospects. Whatever the thing is, there's generally too much tension or pressure on the child somewhere that creates that anxiety, and that can be really tricky. I mean, have you come up against that with trying to recognize maybe the parents are perhaps the source of a problem, and how do you approach that with them without offending or ostracizing and still being able to help the child?
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned that because that has always been a very, very tricky place where you really cannot, you cannot kind of instill a thought process in a child that you are like this because of your parent, because, well, that's not the point here. That's not the point, that
Right.
why you are, because your parent is a certain way or you're a certain way. I think what message we always want to drive forward is that yes, things happened, and yes, things happened in a certain way, and they were beyond your control because you were not in a position to protect yourself. And making them understand at the point of the life you're standing today at, from the moment, and understanding what you have today from that moment and understanding, and becoming aware of the power of your own mind to make that shift. The moment you make that choice to do so is now in your control.
Hmm.
So while that couldn't be controlled, and that still probably cannot be changed or controlled, but guess what?
Yeah.
We anyways can never control external and the other people's behavior. It's our illusion that we can say we can
Mhm.
change people. We really can't.
Yeah.
We can change
So
people.
you're working on empowering the child to handle
Yeah,
pressure, to navigate
yeah,
relationships. Is that
yeah.
how you're approaching that?
Yeah, to build coping mechanisms, to
Hmm.
understand that you have it within you, and to give them that constant reminder that how powerful you truly are. So
Yeah.
it's a reminder that they need. It's just a reassurance that they need. And it's that unconditional acceptance, even when they're going wrong, even when they're not able to follow what you're saying. You just have to understand that it's hard thing. It's very, I just recently watched this thing. I don't know, Tricia, if you watched this, there's a thing on Netflix called The Programs. I don't know if you've watched that.
I haven't.
And that whole docuseries is based on certain institutes which were running in America at a certain point of time, and apparently they're still running.
Was that the thing with the kids go out into the wilderness because they're quote bad kids or something?
They're called troubled teens. So the
Hmm.
term given to them is they are supposed to be behavior modification spaces.
Yes,
The
I've seen
troubled
that listed.
teen in
I
the
haven't watched
sense, and honestly, I was horrified. And I really sat back and thought, I wonder how come we call them troubled behaviors or teens. Teenage itself is a volatile state. I
it.
mean, teenage is not troubled teens. It's just a natural process of their physical, mental, and chemical and biological growth, which is going to
They have
wreak
poor
havoc on them.
judgment. They're trying
Yeah,
naturally to separate from their parents and get out from under the control as they gradually take over their own life. And of
yeah,
course, they're naturally fighting against the mom and dad who are trying to control them and keep them in line. And then
yeah,
they've also got all these societal expectations and, all of these bigger concepts that their young minds aren't able to grasp fully or even
yeah,
to extrapolate, well, if I do this today, how does that impact me 10 years down the line?
yeah.
Maybe they got picked up by the police for using drugs or something, and they have no understanding that now they have an arrest record and they can't get into, a lot of colleges.
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
it's just this itself, what you just said. So imagine how much it is on its own to deal with for any human being. And imagine having to deal with this whole thought process, keeping in mind that every day of your life, the moment you hit a teenage, that you're dealing with your, biological changes, you're dealing with your, you're neither a grown up, nor you're a child anymore. So you don't know where you fit. So
the
you're
raging
going
hormones.
bonkers over here. Yeah. I mean, you're literally going bonkers over here. Your prefrontal cortex absolutely is not exactly fully helpful at that point as well. You're,
Yeah.
so you are physically also not able to make decisions which would be rational. It's
Mhm.
like physically you are not able to do it. And it is something I feel really needs to be spoken a lot about to parents, that it's not that they don't want to, it's not that they don't understand. It's like sometimes they say, I know I understand this is wrong, but I don't know why I still end up doing it.
Mhm.
These are the statements we need to hear and
Mhm.
understand, that it's not a conscious decision those children are making. It's not a conscious behavior that's happening out of them. And like in RTT, we are taught that sometimes those behaviors are attention seeking. Sometimes they're trying to rebel for another reason, which You have missed out in the childhood, which child has developed, and now in teenage it's just sprouting out as a behavior. So sometimes the roots are already lying down, something has happened. If you're
Mhm.
seeing a teenage who is really troubled and who's really rebelling or seeking attention and showing a behavior which is very self-destructive, then instead of looking at the child and saying his behavior needs to be corrected, we need to say, okay, let's go back and see what set this off.
Mhm.
Something set this off. And even the child
What
doesn't
makes you
realize it.
think that this is an okay behavior? And what, I mean, I used to ask when my kids were young, I would say, what made you think this was a good idea?
Hmm.
Um, and I'm going to help you clean up this mess you made, but first I want to find out, like, what made you think this was a good idea?
Hmm.
And what did you think was going to come from this? And usually the answer was, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they don't think it out, they're like, I don't know, it just
Yeah.
seemed like a good idea in the moment. It's like, well, dummy, this is what happens when you do this. um and you're just like, God, it's so frustrating as an adult. And then you have to step
Yeah.
out of that and go, okay, but they're not an adult, so they're not behaving in a rational way because they're a kid.
Yeah.
But all we can do is really go, all right, buddy, don't do that anymore.
Thank God for that.
And then they grow up. And, yeah, my youngest one says things to me like, Mom, you're my best friend. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
he's 23 and he is my heart, that kid. Um, but they grow, they change, and you guide them through it. It's not your job to force them into stuff. It's your job to tame the wild beast within them, I suppose.
yeah. I mean, it is, and I always say, Tricia, one of the best ways to connect with your children when especially they're going through a phase which you don't understand, which you probably as an adult can see is leading them to a very destructive path, or whatever perceptions we have created in our head, which might not even happen, but as parents we do worry, and that is who we are. I think one of the ways that worked with even with my daughter when she was going through her initial years of teenage, and of course we faced issues as well. It's just a part of every household. That's just going to happen. Difference of opinions are going to happen. And the policy, whatever we want to call it, the word you want to give it, what I felt was that they have so much energy that needs to be channeled into something more productive. So the way I looked at it, I kind of, if I said, if I have to force her into something, and if I have to say, okay, do whatever you want to do in life, just do this one thing for me. Okay, fine. You don't like it, just do it for me. Everything else you can just do the way you want to do it. I got her into yoga. I said, I just get into yoga because I'm a yoga person. I've been doing yoga into yoga and meditation for about now 11 years. And at that time, I knew this would channel her life into. I knew the power of yoga, and I knew what it can bring to her life and how it can, help her even through her, physical things as she grows through those phases. And second is acceptance, compassion,
Mhm.
and that unconditional love and support. At that point, the parent has to really put a very strong kind of a, rock on your heart and say that, okay,
Mhm.
you got to show trust in your child. Come on, you
Well,
got
yeah,
to
and
show trust in your
teenagers
child.
are prickly characters, and they're not the easiest people to love sometimes.
No, yeah. That's what I said. You have to literally
Sometimes
just
it's hard
put
to
that.
even like them.
Yeah, they do,
You're like,
absolutely.
yeah,
And especially when they start talking back, it's a very hard space for a parent to be able to hold, your horses and say that I'm the adult here. At that time, there are times, of course, you will lose it. I
you're like,
lost it.
no,
I mean, we've
that
had
is not okay.
screaming matches at
Yeah,
each other.
you will not speak to me that way. I will not tolerate that.
Yeah.
And let's cool off a little bit, and then we're going to talk some more about this, and then the
Mm.
eye rolling, like, like, makes you want to smack them upside the head so their eyes get stuck in there when they do that.
We can do that in the mind, and I think we do a
Yeah.
lot of that in our minds. But yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I'm going in the other room so I can slam my hand in the drawer or something and look, oh. Yeah, they are frustrating, aren't they?
Oh, they
Yeah,
are.
I knew
They
when my
definitely.
my daughter was young, she was, I think one of the first words out of that child's mouth when she was very small was horse. And we knew from a very young age she was, I feel like girls are either horse kids or they're not horse kids, and she was a horse kid. Um, and we started taking horseback riding lessons when she was 6, I think. And at that point, it's really more about, a fun activity. But as she grew and she got a little skill, I would talk to moms at the barn about, their daughters and their horseback riding, that they had teenagers. And I was always advised, get your child involved in something they are passionate about
Yeah.
and keep them engaged in it. And something like horseback riding for a teenage girl was all consuming of her mental faculties, her time, her everything. It was
Hmm.
exercise, it was responsibility, it was everything.
Yeah.
Time management. She became involved in, various activities and so forth. And it made her so busy she didn't have time to get into much trouble.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
she's a veterinarian. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so
That
and
amazing,
yeah, and
right?
with my younger one, he was really interested in outdoors things. So he loved to go camping and all of that kind of stuff. So we got him involved in an organization that did a lot of camping and outdoorsy activities. And they just were so engaged with their stuff, there wasn't a lot of other time. And I think a lot of parents, maybe they sign their kids up for various things, but it's
Yeah.
not something the child's necessarily passionate about.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep them fully engaged and really passionate and to build something from that.
Yeah. Very
Uh,
well said. Yeah. Very well said. I mean, this is the approach even I'm taking with my son. I mean, even though he's autistic, he's 16 now. But with him, because I had to use such a different approach of, saying, how am I going to navigate this space? I'm not going to understand. And what you just said, that's the approach I took. What is he showing passion towards? What is
mhm,
he leaning towards? Academics were not his thing. He hated school. I mean, he
yeah.
just, even though he was going to a regular school and he had a learning assistance for himself, but he really didn't thrive there. Just didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then bullying comes into the picture at a certain age for
Yeah.
children, especially boys. I mean, I think it just comes in. It's just a part of growing up process. And after that, it was just a quit for us.
Mhm.
And even though everybody was so great about it, including his school, but he just said no. And I have been just following his lead, just like you said, you knew your daughter said horse, and somehow that you took it as a part of like, okay, when she hit that age, okay, let me channel her into towards something she's
Yeah.
passionate about. And I saw my son being passionate about music,
Mhm.
and he got into learning piano. From piano, he got into learning cello. Then he
Wow.
wants to learn playing a guitar, and then he wants to do art. And it just took from one thing to just keep opening door to different things. Where
Mhm.
I mean, he knows how to read and write basic, but he doesn't even use it. To him, music and art does it. And now he's
Fix
hit
him
his
up.
teenage years. And the first thing I realized that, okay, he started, I mean, I just got introduced him to a coach and we said, okay, let's do a trial class. And we realized that he loved doing physical activity. And he started going to the gym and he just has a coach who just, supports him in that process. Now, all this extra energy when in these teenage years is bubbling up and, they don't know what to do with it,
Mhm.
like you channeled it towards their passions. And I personally feel, I think that's one of the best ways, that they don't have the time to think or be destructive or do, because they are involved in something which they
Make
love.
them busy.
Absolutely, make them busy. They love it, that that extra energy is not making them go
It
crazy.
doesn't feel like a burden because they're doing something that they love,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and they're learning life skills through these activities.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of parents sign their kids up for music lessons or sports or whatever, and it isn't necessarily because the child is super engaged with it. It's just something to keep them busy, but it needs to be
Yeah,
more than that. It needs to fully engage the mind, the body, the spirit, all of it, so that they really
yeah,
immerse themselves and it
yeah,
becomes their passion. And it can then lead to lifelong, activities or careers. And like in the case of my daughter, she was very interested in animals and now she's a vet.
yeah.
Um, you know, did it lead to
Yeah,
a
we
career for
never
my son?
know.
No, but he's a door and window salesman.
I mean, he's just still 23, right? You just said
Right.
he's
But he owns
23.
his own house, he pays his own
Yeah.
bills,
Oh, wow. But
yeah,
that itself is amazing. So, I mean,
yeah,
whichever way he started. So I guess, and we all keep changing phases in life. I'm
yeah.
not doing what I started at 23 at what I was doing, when I was 21. But today I'm on a very total different path. But that was my foundation where I learned to pay my own bills, that sense of responsibility and
Mhm.
understanding. The every action has a consequence to it. I think these basic ground understandings and rules that okay, you might want to go and do whatever you want to do in life, but always remember there are consequences to actions. And as long as you're willing to take ownership of those consequences,
Mm.
be my guest.
So let me ask you this. Now that you're graduated with your RTT certifications, and how are you planning on then folding the RTT into your coaching?
Yes, in fact, doing RTT to me was one of the reasons is because when I started coaching, which was just about 2 years ago as well, I realized that not always conscious action helps with the subconscious beliefs. And I used to realize that at some point the client is really willing to change, transform, and they're doing everything right. And then they are beating themselves up, thinking that, at some point the resistance is so strong, they don't understand why things are not shifting. And I don't know why I'm not able to do, everybody's doing great. Why am I stuck? What's happening? And I always wondered what was the answer to that missing piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
And at that point, RTT just kind of came in front of me because I knew Marissa from before. I'd done a course of her in 2020 earlier. I think 2020 we did a lot of things we never did in life because there was so much time.
Did you do her mind? Did you do her
It's
Mind
like
Valley course?
yes, I did her Mind Valley course. Yes, and I remember that, and I'm like, and then I was subscribed to her mailing list as well. And then this just mail comes up, and I said, you know what? Let me just give it a try and see how
Mhm.
does this work. And I got on a call with them, and plus, of course, I did my own homework and I studied more how the RTT works through Marissa's YouTubes and everything. And I realized this could be the missing piece of the puzzle. And I'm just going to bring on in. And I really fell in love. And I fell in love with the process of hypnosis on its own because it's really such a powerful space for human beings to tap into their true potential. I really believe in it because it's a space of heightened awareness. Even we don't realize how much we can actually uncover, clarify, clear, release, and renew in that space of hypnosis, which we could really probably take years to do through conscious action. And it could happen just so fast,
Yes.
when you are in that space of hypnosis. So that really fascinated me, intrigued me. And that's how I decided that, okay, RTT it is.
Had you done a professional session with another practitioner before you decided to get your own certifications?
No, actually, I didn't. I
So
hadn't
you'd
done
never even
anything
experienced
except
it
for
before you
myself.
went to school?
No, never,
Wow.
never.
Wow. That's amazing. Mm. I think a lot of practitioners come into this because they've had a session and they see the transformative power of it. So you're different in that respect. Most people have had a session, they've experienced it, and you've just heard about it, understood it, and we're looking for a missing piece.
Yeah.
And it's like you found a random piece of the puzzle and plugged it in, and lo and behold, it fit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Because for me, I like to simplify concepts. So for me, it was everything, eventually, the whole game is of the subconscious mind.
Hmm.
Human being is basically the whole game is our subconscious mind, and
Yeah.
it's millions of years old. It's not a mind which is just based on 10 years, 50 years, or whatever years we're talking. It's like human
90% of your
evolution.
brain is operating in the subconscious realm.
Yeah,
90% of the thoughts that go through your head are completely subconscious. And you don't
exactly.
have that direct connection to access that information. I mean, I don't sit there and go, I think I'm going to make my fingernails grow today.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
It
Your brain, your body is controlling that. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of really interesting stories like Joe Dispenza and even Marissa Peer herself, who have done physical healing. I've experienced that as well.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I know a lot of people that have utilized the power of the subconscious to completely radically change the way their body operates. And
Yeah.
it sounds kind of kooky. Um, but when you really delve into that science, I know there's a fabulous book. I think it's David Hamilton, Why Woo Woo Works. I believe that's the author's name. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
And Marissa told me about the book when I first started school. And I read the book, and I've always been a person that really did not embrace like alternative stuff. And I'm very much, like, I'm science.
Hmm.
And I would just roll my eyes when people put crystals on their windowsills and.
I do that still, actually.
Yeah, I just thought that's just nutty. Like, that's not
Yeah.
real. Like, if that's isn't that cute, that makes you feel good. Okay. But then when I got into all of this stuff and I started, like, I read that book, Why Woo Woo Works, and it really talks about everything from the power of prayer to Reiki to reflexology, you name it, why it works. And
Hmm.
he actually cites scientific studies that support it. And it just made a ton of sense to me. And I was like, yeah, I mean, and he starts out really talking about like the placebo effect and
Yeah.
why that works in medical trials. And it's all tied to the subconscious mind because you believe
Yeah.
it works, therefore it does. And this
Yeah.
idea of manifesting and meditation and all of these practices in
Yeah.
the more new age realm and why they actually benefit the human body and the human mind and
Yeah.
how they benefit. I think that's super compelling.
Yes, it is. And for me, that was the simple answer because being a life coach already, I already understood the power of the subconscious mind and
Mhm.
how. But I also understood that conscious action is not enough because there is a lot of times people are trying hard consciously and doing things consciously the way they're supposed to be done, but
Right.
something is not clicking and they just don't have the answer. Why not? When that answer is in the subconscious.
Hmm.
And if we teach people and train people and even make them experience it for themselves, I think we are just equipping them with so much self empowerment and understanding of who they truly are and what are they truly capable of only if they realized and understood this one truth. I think Marissa puts it very nicely, like she said, like we are going to probably run ourselves out of business in a few decades because because we are just going to give them that understanding that you can do it, because it is actually, I'm just going to facilitate and show you how. The moment you experience it, the moment you see it, oh my God, it was always all me. And that's when the game changes.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful world we would be living in. What a
That's the
beautiful
huge
future
light bulb
generation.
moment for a lot of people, right? It's that moment that you realize that you created this problem for yourself in your own mind. And more than that, when you recognize that the thing you created, maybe it's I have eczema or psoriasis or I have, you know, asthma or whatever the thing is, it serves a
Mm.
purpose.
Yeah.
Serves a purpose. So what is that? You're an alcoholic. Well, what does that do for you? What do you mean? It's terrible. Well, it must have a benefit. What
Yeah.
is that benefit? And then exploring that, well, you realize Well, it gets me out of having responsibilities. It makes nobody ask anything of me. Or maybe it punishes me because I truly believe I deserve to have nothing in my life.
Yeah.
So there is that benefit. There's a reason that thing exists, that behavior, that problem, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a reason it exists. And as soon as you recognize what it's doing for you,
Yeah.
why it came into being, and that you, in fact, did create this all by yourself in your head, and you created that. So, how powerful your mind is to do this. Isn't your mind equally powerful to not do this, to make it stop? And
Yeah.
it isn't always as simple as like, oh, okay, so I'll just stop that. Um, Sometimes it does take a little effort and work and sustain, of course, but in some cases, that's all it takes for a client to just go recognize that and go, okay, bump, gone. And in other
Yeah.
cases, it takes effort and sustained, repeated
Yeah,
stuff.
I think the effort and sustaining of changing the narrative that you become habitual with is where I think little more work is needed after the awareness. After the awareness, you just have to change the habit of saying the things you've been saying to yourself all this time.
That
Because
self-talk.
exactly, the self-talk, the dialogue with yourself, and and it is a habit. It just creates, you just create those, neural pathways in your brain by constantly repeating the same thing over and over again. So if you're going to create a new life, obviously you'll have to clear that muck before. And to do that, in order to do that, you have to replace it with something positive and new. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the effort. That's the effort needed after awareness. After the understanding, you just need to rewire, like we say, and start having a new internal dialogue with yourself. And voila, you see the life changing literally in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. And it's not till sometime later you go, I'm not that way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because this is another misconception I've seen when people come into RTT, probably because they hear a lot about it and they expect like something happening, literally like a magic wand. It should just happen, and one session should transform me. And sometimes they'll do three, four sessions and say, I mean, I don't think something is happening, nothing is changing, and nothing is going on. And then you're sitting there and looking at them and watching, already there is a change because you can see the change and you're saying, okay. And then you make them understand that change happens in three levels: there's instant, there's cumulative, there's retroactive. So sometimes you're going to feel the transformation instantly, and sometimes you're going to see it build up slowly, and sometimes you're not going to see it at all, but other people are going to see it in you and say, oh my God, you changed, you're not the same person anymore.
Right.
And then you realize, oh, you know what? I did RTT 6 months ago. And probably, I mean,
Yeah.
it does happen. I've seen that happen, Tricia. And at that point, you feel, okay, it might be a thankless job, but guess what? As long as I see a life change, it really
Mhm.
doesn't matter whether someone admitted it or not. It really
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I've experienced it all of the ways, I mean, there's really, and I've done, I don't know, dozens of sessions now with, on myself. As we do going through school, you get a lot of access to that. And then, of course, afterwards, I continue to use it for all sorts of things with colleagues. But, out of all the sessions I've done, I've probably only had a massive light bulb change in a session twice. And it's like suddenly, like, lightning strikes you on the head, and you're like, oh my God. And then bingo.
Yeah.
That is not the typical. Normally what I experience is, you're like, okay, I feel better, I feel relief, you've gone through a lot of emotions, you've let things out, you've, like, looked and examined, you feel tired afterwards, whatever.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
maybe a few days go by, and this is usually more what happens to me. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I'll be sitting watching TV or reading or something, and all of a sudden my mind wanders, and I'll have this thought like, oh, and some connection will be made. And sometimes it's doing something that's not really taxing on your mind, like watching TV or playing a video game on your phone or something dumb like that. And it's like it allows the freedom in your mind to wander while you're doing this passive activity. And all of a sudden, this connection will be made. It's like some synapse just came together in that moment. And I'll go, oh, and it helps you. All of a sudden you see something in a different way that you'd never thought of before. Here goes my dog alarm barking. Sorry about that. But it's kind of this really amazing experience when that happens and you realize you're suddenly like, like I'm seeing something here and making a new connection. And other times it's ways down the line and you just didn't even notice the change at all, but then you recognize that your behaviors have changed, your thought process has changed completely. So I've experienced it all three ways. Usually it's the middle one.
Yeah, it is usually, you're right. I think usually it's the middle one. I haven't experienced like when I got into my practice sessions with my partners as well, and I realized a lot of stuff for me came up as well, which somewhere I had suppressed under the rug because I put on the personality of a high achiever, perfectionist. I was living that life. I mean, my life was full of trauma after trauma after trauma. And then I just picked myself up, became hyper independent, and this ambitious woman, go get it kind of it from the world, where basically my first marriage failed disastrously. And my daughter is from my first marriage. So I went through that divorce and I went through the custody of my child, which was really a messy affair. And everything, of course, continues to become layers over layers over layers. So trauma, anyways, continued, and the personality got even more cemented, more, into me, that saying, okay, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go make a life in the world and I'm going to do this. But I realized when I worked with my issues with my partners, my therapists as well in RTT, that it what you just said exactly, that while you're in your session, like it's sometimes rarely that that things happen, the aha moment happens, but the actual effect of it, as if a different dimension open in your mind when you are going about life and doing something, like you said, very passive activity, and suddenly a thought comes and you're like, oh, I get it, you know,
Yeah.
I understand it. Oh, that's the reason I've been, this particular problem of mine. Oh, that is the reason this has been. And the moment you understand it, it is also in a sense of kind of validation for yourself,
Yes.
that it's okay, nothing is wrong with me. So I understand what's going on, why I turned out to be this
Yeah.
way in a particular case, or this behavior or this reaction in a particular way. And your responses change because now you see why you are who you are.
Yeah.
Suddenly, like you said, in your behavior, it starts showing. Your the way you relate to people changes. Like suddenly my way of responding to the same situation became very different towards my partner, towards, my co-workers, everything. And I realized, and even to my friends, and I'm like, I actually didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was realize. That
Yeah.
realization brought a very natural response that kind of cemented the belief that, the thought, feeling, behavior, response, and action. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And that I agree with you. It's generally the middle, casual way when things just transform slowly. And before you know, you really are a different person. I think that I truly believe in. It changes you over gradually, eventually, but there's a very different side of you that blossoms like right in front of your eyes.
Yeah. And it's not that it changes you per se, it allows you to be who you authentically are
Hmm.
without all of the garbage. And I always feel that trauma in particular peels off in layers,
Yeah.
especially if it's been long-term trauma. Just a little bit, it peels back. And doing the RTT is really almost like you're going into a dark hallway with lots of doors and they're all locked. And
Yeah.
RTT is the
Yeah.
key that unlocks all of the doors. But it's up to you to then explore what's inside of each of those rooms and to figure out where it belongs. And so by unlocking those doors, which is kind of the metaphor for that second way we change, right? You've unlocked the doors, you've given access to all of this stuff, and it's just a matter of going in there and putting it together and figuring out how all this stuff fits. It gains that access to you. So it's really a
I love
beautiful,
what you
beautiful
just
thing.
said. I
Thank you.
love what you said that it's not per se that changes you, but it actually makes you who you
Who you
really are, more of who you authentically are. I love that because that is actually true. That is what the reality of it is.
are.
What is hidden behind the persona that you have built for yourself? Like we say, you're
Yes.
not born with this personality, you built it over the years and then you identified yourself with it.
Yes.
And when you go back to that space of unlayering that, like peeling those layers off, and yes, it's a choice you make to do so. And yes, sometimes it needs a lot of courage. I mean, I for sure know that a certain type things really need a lot of courage to face and go back and look at them again.
Yeah.
But guess what? It's worth it. It really is worth
It's
it.
so worth it. I mean, I
Yeah.
deal with trauma almost exclusively in my practice. And a lot of clients, they're in a seriously bad way when they get to me. They've
Mm.
tried everything, they're miserable, they're stuck, they're
Mm.
contemplating all sorts of things. And they're terrified to face their demons, right? And a lot of what I do is really I focus more on the feelings and beliefs that were formed within these memories, these
Yeah.
scenes from the past, however we phrase that. And I'm not always necessarily going to take somebody directly into a scene, especially one that's so traumatic and so incredibly painful. Um, and it makes me think of a conversation I had with another therapist, Monica, and she
Mm.
said, sometimes when you do that, it triggers an anxiety or a panic attack right there in the session. And
Mm.
Monica's response to that was, here it is, let's play. And I love that. It cracks me up, but it's really
Mm.
true. So sometimes I will work them up to the edge of that so that we can access the feelings and where in the body you feel it. What is that thought? What's that belief in that moment
Yeah.
that you formed? And what is it right now as you're on the edge of that scene
Mm.
that you're so afraid of? What is it that you think, feel, and believe about yourself right then and there? And what are you feeling? And that's
Yeah.
really the crux of what we're trying to get at. And as we begin to pull those things out and unpack them from those unlocked doors,
Yeah.
they become braver and braver, and they can go deeper and deeper into those scenes. Um,
Yeah.
and you realize, you're not actually reliving anything. You're just reviewing it from a
Mm.
safe distance,
Mm.
and it isn't always even necessary to look directly at it. You can look at it like this.
Yeah.
you know
When you can just peek through it,
just
you
peek
can
through the
go to,
crack just a little bit,
yeah.
and go,
Yeah.
oh.
And it's so interesting that nobody ever taught us, or nobody ever probably even had an inclination to understanding that how the belief is formed. I mean, in that moment, we have beliefs and we all understand they could be limiting beliefs or they could be whatever beliefs, but we actually don't understand how they were formed. What moment did I decide that's the belief I'm going to carry or live my life with about myself? This is how, and how did my persona came to be? Because I made these little beliefs every day through every event or experience I went through, and then I put those beliefs together in a bag and decided that this is the bag I am, and this is the personality I am,
Yeah.
and this is my whole identity. And those beliefs is the identity that we become.
Well, yes, your
And
beliefs form your reality.
exactly. And that drives our behavior. People say, what do you mean by saying you create your reality? And my simple answer to that is because your reality is created by the choice and the decisions and the behaviors you have in your everyday life. And your choice, your decisions, your behaviors are driven by your beliefs
Mm-hmm.
you have created through the years, through
Yes.
subconscious or unconscious experiences that you remember or you don't remember. And that is how you create your reality, because every choice you make every day, every decision you take every day, every behavior you show towards a relationship, towards a partner, towards a colleague or towards your child, it is creating a ripple effect of events happening in your
Mhm.
life.
Well,
And
and
if you,
yes,
yeah,
and I think I
yeah,
get into this with my narcissistic abuse clients because a
mm,
lot of them will say, I can't possibly leave my abuser because I have kids, and I'm like, yeah, but having the children in there in that pressure
yeah,
cooker with this abuser, even though he isn't abusing the children directly, he is abusing them via you.
yeah,
So children witness how their parents interact, even in a non-abusive household. They're with two healthy, normal parents.
mm,
Maybe one is disrespectful to the other on a regular basis. The
mm,
children see that. And there's that old, I don't know if you call it a wives' tale or whatever, but you always, people will tell you that, especially for girls, you marry your father. And well, no,
yeah, yeah. I
you
know what you mean.
marry your more dominant parent is what you do.
Yeah.
And
Mm,
so the child is reenacting in their current adult life and relationships their
mm,
childhood dynamic, their parents' relationship, or whatever prominent relationship was in that household. So,
mm,
what you're seeing in a dysfunctional relationship or a normal, healthy one with some disrespect or whatever behavior you're dealing with, that's what the child then repeats. And a
mm.
child always believes that they are somehow at fault for any strife or, discord in the household. So mommy and daddy get divorced. Well, somehow the child's at fault.
Yeah, they
That's the
internalize it.
child's
Yeah,
belief. And
yeah,
so if mommy neglects me and is mean to me, that must mean I'm a terrible person. Must mean I'm an unlivable person. I'm just no good. Nobody could
yeah,
possibly want me, love me, need me. Therefore, I self-sabotage
yeah,
because and that plays out throughout the adult life. And when you recognize where that
yeah,
came from, it's because mom worked three jobs because she was divorced and didn't pay enough attention to you, or maybe
yeah,
she was flat out abusive. I don't know. Um,
yeah,
and so the child then believes this thing about themselves, and that carries through their entire life. And
yeah.
I
Absolutely.
realized that my childhood had an absolute 100% reason why I was in a relationship with a narcissist, and
Yeah,
it plays out throughout your life. And when you recognize that, where did that belief come from? it
yeah.
it frees you. It completely
Mm.
frees you,
It
but
really does.
you can't consciously figure that out. I truly believe
Mm.
when I first started all of my journey into RTT that everything stemmed from the fact that I was adopted at birth, and somehow that was in my head. And while yes, it did play in a little bit,
Mm.
it had more to do with the dynamic in my childhood family. I never recognized anything was even bordering on abuse beyond the crap that went on between my sister and my mom.
Mm.
And I was never directly abused in my mind. Well, I'm here to tell you I was. I now understand that in a very different way. But, the reality is every child grows up believing my family is as normal and next door neighbor as any family on the planet. We're just
Mm.
regular people in a regular, normal family.
Mm.
But there's really no such thing.
Yeah,
Every
I
family has
absolutely.
their ghosts or whatever. And there's something somewhere in that relationship, somewhere from the childhood, that will drive you to certain behaviors, right?
Mm. And it's interesting you shared that, and thank you for sharing that. Uh, I relate so much to that. The fact that even I didn't think I was adopted, but I was told, like my sister had this as a joke. Sometimes I feel these jokes need to change. It's
Mm.
not a joke to tell a child that we picked you up from a garbage can, and especially if a child and I don't know, for some reason I didn't look like anybody in my family when I was born. I was this child who looked like an alien. I was just totally different looking. I mean, I was born, and then I was this dark, and I had this golden hair, and I had a mole in the middle of my forehead, and I was like, everybody called me an alien, like she just doesn't look like anybody in the family. And then my sister made it a joke that, yes, of course, because you don't belong to the family and we picked you up from the garbage. And like you said, I grew up thinking that that's just the siblings and they do this to you. And but then you don't realize. And I remembered I went back to scenes where
But
how
it's
much it
hurtful.
hurt me and how much I cried. And I used to write letters to some unknown father or mother who didn't exist, but in my mind, they started existing somewhere because I started deciding, of course, because I might not belong because I don't look like anyone, I don't behave like anyone in this family. And over the years, I started kind of discounted it on the name of siblings and family and normal behavior.
Normal sibling teasing.
Yeah, and but then today I realize that I don't discount it anymore. It like you said, they didn't directly abuse you, but they did in a way abuse you. There was so much like my mother and my sister, exactly the same story. That to me, they were those figures I was so afraid of. It's like I don't know when I'm gonna hit from what side. Not physically hit, but I don't know when I'm going to be crushed mentally, emotionally from which side, no matter what I do, no matter how well I perform academically, or, a lot of other activities I was involved in, which I've always aced and
Yeah.
excelled at. And yet it was dismissed like it never existed. And I realized that I was living with narcissist siblings, narcissist mom, and it's just that everything was it always became about them, and somehow that's an indirect way of abusing your child. As if she's invisible, like
Yeah.
your child feels invisible no matter what I do, you don't see me. So you
Hmm.
just constantly, and that's how I became a high achiever. I think for me, the
Because
need to
they
be
were so
seen.
demanding of you.
Yeah, and at the need to be seen for me, the only way that I'm never going to be good enough unless I'm seen.
Hmm.
So even if the only way to be seen is keep on climbing the ladder, keep on achieving somewhere,
Hmm.
there's no end to it. I'm
Yeah.
going, like, whatever I do, I'm going to be at top of it. Whatever I become, I'm going to be the top in the world. Like, that's the thought process my career kept going on. But it didn't
Because
make
then
sense,
that
man.
reflects positively back on your family because
Yeah.
you achieve. I mean, I had a very different kind of take on that when I was a kid because, my parents were substantial. They were 40 when I was born, which was unheard of,
Oh,
you know.
oh.
Um, and so most of my friends, their parents were, 10 years older than my older sister, right? And so it was just my sister and I, and she's 11 years older than me. And she's mentally ill. She's a narcissist. She's histrionic. She's borderline personality. All of these
Mm,
things. She came through a foster care situation
mm,
and came to my mom and dad when she was almost 2, I believe, and
mm,
never fully attached with anybody. So she had been neglected so severely she didn't make connections to other people normally. And
mm,
when she did, she only attached to my mother, and it was like with a death grip, basically. There was no
mm,
room for anyone else in the room between my mom and my sister. And as my sister got older, in my mom's mind, my sister was a brat.
mm,
She thought they had spoiled her, and that was what was wrong with her. Of course, my sister was born in the 1950s. And at this time, nobody had an understanding of mental health in any way,
mm.
shape,
Of
or form.
course. Yeah, of
And
course.
so, of course, from my mom's limited, uneducated lens, obviously it was her fault, and my sister was a spoiled brat. Well, she was that, but she was also mentally ill and unstable.
Of course.
So,
Mm,
as my mom then tried to step in and coerce her into better behavior and discipline her in a very stern way, my sister then rebelled, as teenagers tend to do. But when someone's also narcissistic, histrionic, and borderline, they rebel in a violent way.
mm,
And then physical altercations would transpire, and my sister would grab my mom by the hair, bash her head into the wall, slap her, kick her, call her horrible names. All
oh
of
my
this
God.
would happen right in front of me, and I would witness it all. And then my mom would turn to me and say, "Don't you ever tell your daddy what you just saw."
Oh
So
my
I was
God.
then sworn to secrecy. And then I had a different experience with my mom. She realized my sister was out of control. So she was going to make sure I did not deviate. And so she
Yeah.
was very, very, very strict and stern with me to the point of being really bordering on full on abuse. I mean, she didn't physically hit me, but the verbal altercations, the way she would talk to me and belittle me. I was told I would never amount to anything, that I was lazy. Um, I wasn't expected to become educated in any way, and they didn't care if I made good grades. That was the funny thing. Um, because it was her truest belief that I would grow up to be a wife and a mom, and I needed to learn to cook and sew and clean and all of these things. And it was important to my mother, because of her own hangups about her body, that I also be thin and pretty.
Oh.
And so that was her focus with me. Her own fucked up, view of her own body and her relationship with her own body then spilled into mine. And it was, I would be berated for any weight gain of any sort. I would be pranced into the closet and made to stand on the scale naked. And then
Oh
she
my
would stand
God.
there and, you know, tell me how fat I was. And I was not, I was very thin. Um, pubescent kids tend to gain a little weight here and there.
Hmm.
So my mother would say, "Oh, you've gained 2 pounds since the last time I weighed you. You're going to be so fat, you'll never find a man. No man will ever love you." And this
Oh
is
my
super
God.
damaging, right?
It
So,
is.
of course, then I end up with an emotionally distant husband who, love bombed me like crazy, and I felt unlovable. So here's this man showered me with love and affection, as narcissists do when they first start a relationship. They love bomb.
Yeah.
And I was head over heels in love. And he was emotionally distant, just like my parents. And all of this crap just kind of started, and I was completely drawn into that relationship. So you can see how these patterns from childhood affect you through life.
Yeah, I mean, the same line I was told because I was dark, and apparently we in my culture, being dark is literally being ugly. For some reason, for a girl who's dark, she really cannot be considered beautiful, at least definitely in those times. Today, the world might be changing. And I was constantly told that, oh my God, how are we going to find a guy for her? Please don't ever let the guy see her. If he's going to marry her, just send a picture which is a little bit photoshopped. So maybe she's acceptable on a picture, because if they see her, she's not going to get married. It's going to be a really tough time to get her married because, look at the way she looks. She's so dark. And I know, I mean, today people look at me and say, but you're not dark. I'm like, I really don't know what happened in the teenage, because pre-teenage, I was pretty dark. I don't know, something shifted and I don't know what happened in
Hmm,
the physiology of my body. But yeah, I was born, I mean, if you see, compare the two, there's absolutely no comparison. As if I literally shifted bodies. I don't know what happened.
hmm.
And that,
Maybe your
you know,
mind did that.
I think so. Sometimes I really feel, I might not have understood at that time what I was doing, but I think I somehow very, subconsciously, very deeply kind of created a different texture of skin or color for myself, thinking that that's the only way they'll accept me, or that's the only way I'll become more lovable. Like you said, you felt you're not lovable, and that's the only way I will find a guy and be accepted into my
Because your
society.
value is that man, right? I mean, that was the message I was given. My only value was in who I marry, or if I marry.
Exactly. And that's all the end of your life. Basically, if you can't find a guy to get married to, you're just not a woman anymore. You're just not worth it. You're useless or whatever the hell. Basically, your whole identity is getting married, settled, and having children. And I believe that. I mean, you
Right.
buy into it. That's what you believe life is
Of course.
supposed to be
Your
about.
parents
You
told
don't
you
know
it
any
must be
different.
true. It's true.
Yeah, and you feel like you don't know any different. You're like, yeah, I mean, and it's the major thought on your head that, oh my God, I'm not going to find a guy, I'm not lovable enough. And then whatever, basically you're stuck in your household. My father was an absent father. He was never there. He had alcohol issues. And the only two authority figures, like I have an elder brother as well. He had his own life going on. So for me, the influence of my mother and my sister was plain, I mean, major issues with narcissism and personality disorder, which I can't even begin to think. And I can't believe, the amount of things you're saying is bringing back so much to me. And I personally feel, I think we have a huge overlap of things that we've seen together in our
Mhm.
family. And it's and yeah, people have to, I think we shouldn't brush this thing under the carpet thinking that's just normal. It happens. Maybe it's normal and maybe it happens. And yes, we have zero control over the past. And yes, at some point in life, you have to make a choice to move on. But then you have to take a really good look at yourself and your life and ask yourself, have you really moved on? Is your life in a situation which looks like you moved on? Have you been able to build something much healthier than your past? Then you understand, have you really moved on? Because people think they move on. But
Yeah.
then you sit
Yeah.
back and, take an account of your life and tell me, did you really move on? Did you really change? Did you think that brushing it somewhere and forgetting about it made a whole lot of difference in your life?
Yeah. Well, I think, until you really do the work, you
Yeah,
don't really grasp how off the rails you are.
yeah.
Um, I often, when I first do an intake session with a new narcissistic abuse client,
Mm,
I ask them a lot of statements that and how they agree or disagree with. I feel happiness. I feel joy. I love myself. Things like this, and
mm,
they always say, "Well, of course I love myself." They don't even
mm,
see it. And then
mm,
later, they'll go, "Oh yeah, no, I don't." And I remember when my own marriage started falling apart, and we were seeing a marriage counselor. We did this little quiz,
mm,
what's your attachment style? And mine came
mm,
back secure. And I was like, yeah, I have secure attachment. And then when I really started to examine that, I realized, no, parts of myself are secure and other parts are highly anxious because I had this extreme fear of abandonment that I truly believed stemmed from being adopted. But I realized it had a whole lot more to do with all this other junk. Um,
mm.
and I think some of that just stems from maybe you think you're self aware, but you really aren't until you connect with that part of yourself and
Yeah,
fully can understand who you truly are and who you always were,
yeah,
buried under all the trauma or the coping mechanisms and the maladaptive garbage that you came up with through your life. And
yeah,
once you are able to see it, understand it, you can release it, and then
yeah.
it's a freeing experience. It's a beautiful thing, and it's why they call it a healing journey, because it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's about getting from point A to point B, but point B is not fixed.
Yeah,
It's fuzzy, and I don't
yeah,
think you ever actually arrive there until that last day you take that final breath on this mortal coil and your head hits the pillow for that very last time. That's when
yeah,
you're fully healed. So it's all about the journey. It's a beautiful journey if you allow it to develop and to
yeah,
really do that internal discovery. Well,
yeah. And I think consider yourself worthy enough as well to honor your own life. I mean, why leave this world, live a half-baked life, which is just filled with unknown scenarios and, basically not even like sleepwalking through life. Don't sleepwalk through life.
yeah.
Be so awake and be so full with life that I'm just going to own it in every way. So
Yeah.
healing journey is also about owning it. It's not about blaming anyone, and it's not about becoming a victim or saying no. I think it's understanding that there is a part of you standing somewhere for you to validate it. In your subconscious mind, that part is still there, standing hurt, injured somewhere. And all you have to give is give yourself the permission to look at that part of yourself,
Mhm.
validate that part of yourself, give love to that part of yourself, and that say, you did your best in that situation.
Yeah.
You really couldn't have done anything else. And that's okay. But because guess what?
Mhm.
Today I got you.
That's
Today I see you. and you did nothing wrong. And take that power back, that from this moment onward, we walk together, and we walk as a unit that's aware, that's completely in self-empowerment
Yeah.
and self-acceptance.
Well, great
And
power comes
your
from
whole
self-awareness.
rock changes.
Yeah. That great power comes from self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it has been a absolute pleasure talking with you today. And I think we've probably gone way over time here. So I'm going to sign off for this episode. And it's been such a pleasure visiting with you and talking about all manner of childhood related things. So
Thank you so much, Tricia.
I
Same
wish you
here.
well. I wish you well in the
Same.
future with your business.